Did you know that the average American spends 37% of their income on housing? It's insane, but what if I told you Elon Musk has a plan to change that forever? His $10,000 house isn't just cheap, it's revolutionary. We're talking about a home that can withstand hurricanes, power itself off-grid, and even fold up for easy transport. Sounds too good to be true? Well, stick around because we're about to dive into the nitty-gritty of Musk's latest game changer. Alright, let's talk about the housing crisis because holy crap, it's a mess out there. You know that feeling when you're scrolling through apartment listings and everything looks like it was priced by a drunk monkey with a dartboard? Yeah, that's basically the housing market right now. So picture this, you're working 2 jobs, barely sleeping, and still can't afford a decent place to live. Sound familiar? It's not just you. This is happening all over the US and it's getting worse. We're talking about people working multiple jobs just to keep a roof over their heads. And even then, it's not always enough. Let me throw some numbers at you that'll make your head spin. In 2020, there were over 500,000 homeless people in the US. That's like the entire population of Wyoming just living on the streets. And get this, a recent study found that a minimum wage worker would need to work 97 hours per week to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. That's more than 2 full-time jobs just to have a place to crash. Now let's zoom in on a typical family trying to make ends meet. Meet the Johnsons. Mom, dad, 2 kids, and a dog named Buddy. Both parents are working full-time jobs, but they're still living paycheck to paycheck. They're constantly juggling bills, deciding between groceries and fixing the car, and forget about saving for a down payment on a house. That's about as likely as me becoming the next South Park character. But why is this happening? It's not just inflation making everything more expensive, although that's certainly not helping. There's a whole mess of reasons behind these skyrocketing housing costs. For starters, there's a serious lack of affordable housing being built. Developers are more interested in luxury condos than places regular folks can actually afford. Then you've got stagnant wages that aren't keeping up with rising costs. And don't even get me started on the investment firms buying up properties left and right. The traditional housing market has basically looked at this situation and gone, man, not my problem. They're still churning out McMansions and fancy apartments while ignoring the fact that most people can't afford a cardboard box, let alone a house. It's like they're living in a completely different reality where everyone's swimming in cash. For the average person, owning a home is starting to feel about as realistic as owning a unicorn. The median home price in the US hit $428,007 in 2022. To put that in perspective, that's about 5.7 times the median household income. Back in the 1960s, it was only about 2.3 times. So unless you've got a money tree growing in your backyard, and if you do, can I have a cutting? Good luck ever saving up enough for a down payment. But what if there was a way to change all of this? What if someone came along with an idea so crazy, so out there that it just might work? Well, buckle up Buttercup because that's exactly what's happening. Enter Elon Musk and his absolutely bonkers idea for a $10,000 house. Yeah, you heard that right. $10,000. That's less than some people spend on their coffee habit in a year. Now, I know what you're thinking. A $10,000 house? Yeah, right. Sounds like something you'd see in a cartoon, right next to a money-powered jetpack and a device that turns broccoli into ice cream. But here's the thing. This isn't just another crazy internet rumor. Elon Musk, the guy who's sending cars into space and digging tunnels under cities, is actually working on this. And let me tell you, it's got the potential to shake up the housing market like a snow globe in an earthquake. Alright, so Elon Musk isn't just slapping his name on some random startup's pipe dream. There's a real company behind this $10,000 house thing, and they're not messing around. Meet Boxable, the little David aiming its slingshot right at the Goliath of the housing industry. But can a startup really succeed where governments and big corporations have been failing for decades? Let's find out. Boxable isn't just talking about affordable housing, they're actually building it. Their mission? To offer high-quality, affordable homes to people all over the world. Now, I know what you're thinking. High quality and affordable in the same sentence when we're talking about houses? Yeah, right, but hear me out, because these guys might be onto something. The secret sauce behind Boxable's approach is their manufacturing process. Instead of building houses the old-fashioned way, you know, with a bunch of dudes hammering away in the rain for months, they're cranking these babies out in a factory. Once they're done, they ship the houses to wherever they need to go and set them up in just a few hours. It's like IKEA furniture, but for your whole damn house. Now, you might be picturing some flimsy prefab nightmare, but Boxable's flagship model, the Casita, is actually pretty impressive. It's designed to be energy efficient, easy to own, and suitable for both city slickers and country folk. And get this, they can fold these things up for easy transportation. It's like origami, but instead of a paper crane, you end up with a place to live. But here's where it gets really interesting. Boxable isn't just some pie-in-the-sky idea. They've got over 120,000 people on their wait list, and more than 5,000 customers have already put down deposits. That's a lot of people willing to bet on a $10,000 house. And it's not just average Joes either. The Department of Defense ordered 156 units for military housing. I guess even the government is tired of overpaying for stuff. Of course, it hasn't all been smooth sailing for Boxable. They've faced their fair share of challenges, like trying to scale up production, getting enough funding, and dealing with all the red tape that comes with building houses. You know how every town has its own weird rules about what color your fence can be? Well, imagine trying to build a whole new type of house in those conditions. But Boxable isn't backing down. They've opened a second factory to keep up with demand, and they're aiming to produce one home every 90 minutes. By the end of 2022, they were shooting for a production capacity of 3,600 units per year. That's a lot of affordable houses hitting the market. Now, I know some of you are probably still skeptical. A $10,000 house? Come on, it's gotta be a glorified tent or something. But Boxable is determined to prove that their homes are just as durable, comfortable, and appealing as traditional houses. They're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. They're just trying to make it a hell of a lot cheaper. So what exactly does this $10,000 house look like? Well, the Casita model is basically a studio apartment on steroids. It's got a full-size kitchen, a bathroom with a shower, a living area, and a bedroom space. And because it's all pre-built in a factory, everything from the electrical wiring to the plumbing is already set up and ready to go. It's like getting a fully furnished apartment, except you own the whole damn thing. But here's the real kicker. These houses are designed to be stackable. So if you want more space, you can just add another module on top or to the side. It's like playing with Legos, but instead of a plastic spaceship, you're building your dream home. Alright, so we've seen how Musk's tiny house is supposed to revolutionize the housing market. Yeah, but let's be real for a second. How does this 375 square foot box stack up against your average American home? I mean, we're talking about a house that's smaller than most people's living rooms. It's like comparing a Chihuahua to a Great Dane, but hey, sometimes good things come in small packages, right? So picture this. You've got your typical McMansion sprawling over 10,500 square feet with multiple bedrooms, a huge kitchen, and probably a man cave or two. And right next to it, you've got this little Boxable Casita, looking like it could fit in the McMansion's garage. It's quite the David and Goliath situation. Now, you might be thinking, there's no way this tiny house can compete with a real home. I mean, where are you supposed to put all your stuff? How can you live comfortably in a space that's basically the size of a large walk-in closet? Well, hold on to your hats, because this is where things get interesting. You see, these Boxable homes are like the Swiss Army knives of houses. They're designed to squeeze every last drop of functionality out of that 375 square feet. We're talking clever storage solutions, multi-purpose furniture, and layouts that make you feel like you're in a much bigger space. It's like those clown cars at the circus. You'd be surprised how much they can fit in there. But here's where the Casita really starts to shine. Energy efficiency. Your typical McMansion? It's basically an energy-sucking monster. All those rooms, all that space to heat and cool, it's like trying to fill a leaky bucket. The Boxable Casita, on the other hand, is tight as a drum, good insulation, energy-efficient windows, and even the ability to hook up solar panels. It's like the house equivalent of a Prius. And get this, living in one of these tiny homes might actually be good for your brain. Yeah, you heard me right. Apparently, smaller spaces can lead to reduced stress and increased mindfulness. It's like forced minimalism. Less space means less stuff, and less stuff means less to worry about. Who knew that downsizing could be a form of therapy? Now, I know what you're thinking, but what if I want more space? Well, Boxable's got you covered there too. These little houses are like Legos for adults. If you need more room, you can just add another unit. Want a second bedroom? Stack another casita on top. Need a home office? Attach one to the side. It's like playing house, but for real. Let's talk money for a second. We all know that owning a home can be a real pain in the wallet. Between mortgage payments, repairs, and maintenance, it's like your house is constantly asking you to empty your pockets. But these tiny homes, they're a whole different ball game. Less space means less to maintain, which means more money in your pocket. It's like the house that keeps on giving. And for all you tree huggers out there, here's something to get excited about. These tiny homes have a way smaller environmental footprint than your average house. Less materials to build, less energy to run. It's like the compact car of the housing world, so you can feel good about your living situation and your impact on the planet. Now, I'm not saying it's all sunshine and rainbows. Living in a tiny home does mean making some sacrifices. You're not going to have a 3-car garage or a home theater, and yeah, you might have to get creative with storage solutions, but is that really such a bad thing? Maybe it's time we rethink what we really need in a home. Alright, so we've talked about downsizing and rethinking our needs, but here's a question that might keep you up at night. Can a house that costs less than your average used car actually keep you safe when Mother Nature throws a tantrum? I mean, come on, we've all seen those videos of houses getting torn apart by hurricanes. So how does a tiny $10,000 box stand up to that kind of punishment? Let's face it, when most of us think of affordable housing, we picture flimsy trailers or houses made of straw that the big bad wolf could blow down with a sneeze. But here's where things get interesting. Boxable homes are actually designed to withstand some pretty extreme weather conditions. We're talking heavy rain, snow, and even hurricanes. Yeah, I know, it sounds crazy, but hear me out. These little houses aren't held together with duct tape and prayers. They're built using some seriously tough materials that are both strong and low maintenance. That means they're not just built to last, but they also don't need you constantly patching them up like some rickety old shed. Now, I know what you're thinking. Yeah, sure, they say it's tough, but has anyone actually tested these things? Well, funny you should ask. Boxable puts their homes through some pretty intense testing to make sure they meet high safety standards. It's like they're trying to build a house that could survive the apocalypse or something. But here's where it gets really interesting. These homes aren't just theoretical disaster-proof boxes. They've actually been used in real-world disaster relief scenarios. Imagine your town gets hit by a hurricane, and instead of living in a tent for months, you get to move into one of these little boxable homes. It's like going from camping to glamping, but in a disaster zone. Now, I'm not saying these homes are indestructible, but compared to traditional construction methods, they've got some serious advantages. Experts are actually pretty impressed with the efficiency and sustainability of these modern prefab construction methods. It's like they took everything we've learned about building houses over the past few centuries and said, cool, now let's do it better. One of the coolest things about these boxable homes is that they're modular. That means you can pick them up and move them around like giant Lego bricks. Need to relocate after a disaster? No problem. Want to reconfigure your house because you're tired of the layout? Go for it. It's like having a house with superpowers. But here's the million-dollar question, or should I say the $10,000 question. Are these things actually livable in the long term, or are they just glorified emergency shelters that you'll want to ditch as soon as possible? Well, it turns out that these tiny homes are actually built to be pretty comfortable for the long haul. They're energy efficient, which means lower utility bills, always a plus. And because they're made with durable materials, you're not going to be constantly fixing stuff that's falling apart. It's like they took all the annoying parts of homeownership and said, nah, we don't need those. All right. So we've talked about these tiny houses being tough and comfy, but now let's get into the really wild part, how they actually get to you. You might be thinking, okay, cool, but how does a whole house end up in my yard without a construction crew camping out for months? Well, prepare to have your mind blown, because Boxable's delivery process is about to make Amazon Prime look like snail mail. So picture this, you're scrolling through your phone, maybe looking at cat videos or whatever, and you decide, you know what, I'm gonna order a house today. Sounds crazy, right? But that's basically how it works with Boxable. You place your order and then what? Does a giant stork drop it off? Not quite, but almost as impressive. These Boxable homes are designed to be modular, which is a fancy way of saying they can fold up like the world's biggest origami project. When they leave the factory, they're all compact and ready for their road trip to your place. It's like they're all cozy in their shipping container, just waiting to pop out and become your new home. Now you might be wondering, how the heck does a folded up house turn into, well, an actual house? This is where Boxable's patented folding technology comes in. It's not just a gimmick. This tech is what makes it possible to ship these homes efficiently and set them up super fast. We're talking hours, not months. It's like the difference between microwaving a meal and slow cooking a roast. But let's break down this setup process, because I know you're probably picturing a bunch of confused people staring at an instruction manual the size of a phone book. First off, you've got to make sure you've got all your ducks in a row. That means getting the necessary permits. Yeah, sorry, you still can't escape bureaucracy, and making sure you've got the utilities sorted. It's like prepping for a party, except instead of chips and dips, you're setting up water and electricity. Once all that boring stuff is out of the way, it's showtime. The Boxable home arrives, and this is where things get interesting. Remember how I said it was like origami? Well, now it's time to unfold this bad boy. But don't worry, you won't need a degree in engineering to figure it out. The Boxable team has designed these homes to be set up in about 15 minutes. Yeah, you heard that right. 15 minutes. You could literally set up your entire house in the time it takes to watch half an episode of South Park. Now, I know what you're thinking. There's no way that's possible. It's gotta be some marketing BS. But here's the thing. Boxable has actually done this. They've set up homes in real-world situations, and customers have been pretty impressed with how quickly they can go from a big box to a fully functional house. Of course, it's not always smooth sailing. Depending on where you live, you might run into some challenges. Maybe your local zoning laws are stuck in the 1950s and can't handle the idea of a house that shows up on a truck. Or maybe you live on top of a mountain and the delivery truck driver takes one look at your driveway and nopes right out of there. These are real issues that Boxable has to deal with, and they're working on solutions. It's like they're playing a real-life version of SimCity, trying to figure out how to place houses in all sorts of weird locations. But here's the really cool part. Boxable isn't just doing this as a one-off gimmick. They've already built around 200 of these tiny homes, and they're planning to seriously ramp up production. We're talking about churning out one home every 90 minutes. That's faster than most people can decide what to have for dinner. Alright, so we've seen how Boxable's churning out these tiny houses faster than you can say affordable housing crisis. But let's pump the brakes for a second and talk cold hard cash. You've heard the hype about the $10,000 price tag, but is it legit? Time to put on our detective hats and follow the money trail. Spoiler alert, the answer might just surprise you. First things first, let's address the elephant in the room, or should I say the tiny house in the room. The Boxable Casita actually costs $50,000, not $10,000. I know, it's like finding out Santa isn't real all over again. But hey, $50K is still way cheaper than your average house, which is going for over $400,000 these days. So while it's not quite the dirt cheap dream we were hoping for, it's still a pretty sweet deal. Now here's where things get interesting. The Boxable Casita is like the Lego of houses. You can add more pieces if you want. Want an extra bedroom? Just snap on another unit. Need a home office? There's a module for that. Of course, each addition is gonna cost you, so your final price might end up being more than $50K. But hey, at least you're not paying for space you don't need, right? But wait, there's more. And no, I'm not about to try and sell you a set of steak knives. We need to talk about land. Unless you're planning to park your Boxable on a cloud, you're gonna need somewhere to put it. And let me tell you, land ain't cheap. The cost can vary wildly depending on where you want to live. Thinking about setting up your tiny house in New York City, you might need to sell a kidney or two. But if you're cool with living in the middle of nowhere, you might be able to snag a plot for the price of a fancy dinner. Now let's talk about something that'll make your wallet smile. Utility bills. These Boxable homes are designed to be energy efficient, which means lower electricity and heating costs. It's like they're giving Mother Nature a high five while also keeping your bills low. Win-win, right? But here's where things get a bit tricky. Remember how excited you were when you got your first credit card? Well, getting a loan for a Boxable might not be quite as easy. See, a lot of banks look at these tiny homes and scratch their heads. They're not sure how to classify them, which can make getting a traditional mortgage about as easy as teaching a cat to fetch. Some buyers might need to get creative with their financing, like taking out a personal loan or using a credit card. Just don't max out that card buying avocado toast, okay? Now, I know what you're thinking, but what about the long-term costs? Is this tiny house gonna turn into a money pit? Well, according to the experts, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. While the initial cost is low, you've got to think about things like maintenance and property taxes. And depending on where you put your Boxable, those property taxes could be based on the value of the land, not just the house. So if you decide to plop your tiny house in Beverly Hills, don't be surprised if the taxman comes knocking with a not so tiny bill. But here's the really cool part. These Boxable homes could be a game changer for folks who've been priced out of the housing market. We're talking about low-income families who've been dreaming of owning a home but thought it was about as likely as winning the lottery. With Boxable, that dream might actually be within reach. Just remember, you've got to factor in those extra costs like land and any local regulations. It's not quite as simple as ordering a house on Amazon Prime. So what's the bottom line? Is the Boxable Casita really the affordable housing solution we've all been waiting for? Well, it's not quite as cheap as we first thought, but it's still a pretty sweet deal. You're looking at $50,000 for the base model, plus the cost of land, any customizations you want, and don't forget about those ongoing expenses like taxes and maintenance. It's definitely more than $10,000, but compared to traditional housing, it's like finding a designer outfit at a thrift store price. Alright, so we've covered a lot of ground with Elon Musk's $10,000 house, but here's where things get really interesting. Experts are saying that innovations like Boxable could actually change the game when it comes to housing policies. We might see governments start to create new regulations that support affordable housing initiatives. Pretty cool, right? But here's the thing, if we want to see this housing revolution happen, we can't just sit back and watch. It's up to us to get involved. If you're interested in supporting affordable housing, you might want to look into your local zoning laws and building codes. These can have a huge impact on whether modular homes like Boxable can actually be built in your area. And hey, if you're feeling really fired up about this, why not take it a step further? You could reach out to your local housing authorities or even start advocating for policy changes. Every voice counts when it comes to making housing more accessible for everyone. So what do you think? Are you ready to join the tiny house revolution? Let us know in the comments.